Hello and welcome to the Thought Room. I'm your host, Hallie Rose. This week I am recording from upstate New York. I am staying at my dad's house, enjoying the beauty of the land where I grew up, and I was watching the birds outside my window today and the freshness of springtime and smelling the smells of my childhood. And just trying to get in tune with the simple things that bring me back to my body. This week for me was very much about riding the waves of emotion. And I don't know about you, but it feels like every day is a new flavor for me right now. And some days I feel very productive and motivated and like I have endless time to try new things. And other days, I struggle to get motivated, to get out of bed, and it feels like my body has just been calling for rest. So there's been this interesting dance of wanting to show up, wanting to be online, wanting to offer my gifts during this time, and yet at the same time, something deep within me is calling to go inward and to rest. So very fun to mitigate those two things right now. And I'm sure if you're anything like me, this whole global circumstance is bringing up all kinds of shadow. It's bringing up all kinds of dynamic within your family or whomever you are in a home or apartment sequestered with. These times really show us who we are in a new way. They show us pieces of ourselves that maybe need a little bit of tender, loving care. For myself personally, I've been diving into this audiobook. It is called Heal Your Wounds and Find Your True Self by Lise Bourbeau. And it was recommended to me by my friend Sarah, who is actually my podcast guest today. This book is so interesting. It talks about 5 different types of wounds, core wounding, rejection, abandonment, humiliation, betrayal, and injustice. And it goes into detail about how this expresses subconsciously in the patterning of our lives. So this feels very timely for me because I am actually going through a deep period of personal transformation on top of obviously what our globe is experiencing. And I think that's probably no mistake. I think perhaps a lot of us are feeling that way. We're being called to step into a new version of ourselves. This episode of The Thought Room, as I mentioned, was done with my friend Sarah Riegelhuth. And Sarah and I got the privilege of rendezvousing at Soltara Healing Center while she was there to work with Ayahuasca a couple of months ago. Sarah is one of the most conscious, grounded, yet powerful, badass women I have ever met. She's the CEO of Grow My Team. She's involved in a variety of other businesses as well. And she's launching a new podcast called Conscious Culture any week now. And it's about the evolution of culture in business to a more heart-led, conscious space. And so if you're interested in conscious business, you're definitely going to want to check out Conscious Culture, Sarah's new podcast. And I will put all of the links to find Sarah on all the social media platforms in the show notes. And during this episode, we talk a lot about trauma and core wounding. We also get into some really fun, juicy discussion on love, relationships, sex, intimacy. We talk about Tantra and creating intimacy with yourself and with your partner. And we dive into a little bit of discussion on dating. I actually end up telling a story that is pretty vulnerable to share, but there was a period of time in my life that I'm not incredibly proud of, but I have now embraced as part of myself. But I told Sarah about a time when I was kind of so insecure within myself in the dating world that I actually ended up going on 4 Tinder dates in one night. And we were just giggling about how that version of myself feels a little bit unrecognizable to me now. And kind of a little bit of the process of how I got to feeling like I'm in a different space. Sarah also tells an incredible story about when she joined the Mile High Club by herself on an airplane. So this is a really wonderful episode. And in many ways, as I'm dancing with my core woundings and understanding myself more deeply, I'm diving into a lot of books, actually. I just finished one novel that was really juicy. I read it in 2 days, called Where the Forest Meets the Stars. And then by suggestion of our beloved friend Aubrey Marcus, I'm reading The 49th Mystic by Ted Dekker, which is such a wonderful book. I'm only about 80 pages in, but I'm really digging it. So if you're into fiction and thrillers, these 2 books I highly recommend. Another thing, actually, when I was reading The 49th Mystic today, there is a little memory given by the main character. So the main character is a blind girl, and she talks about how one of her favorite stories growing up in her religious family was a certain parable wherein Jesus heals a blind man. And after Jesus heals this young blind man, Jesus is asked whether the boy's blindness was a judgment for his father's sins or whether it was for the boy's sins. Basically, they asked him, what is the reason for this blindness afflicting him? Jesus basically said it's neither. It's no one's sins. Jesus says that the boy was born blind so that the work of God could be seen in him. And if you read on in the book, Ted Dekker sort of suggests later in the paragraph that the boy was actually born blind so that he could see the work of God. And what does this all mean? Why is this relevant? Well, I think about what's happening in our world right now and how it would be understandable and easy to fall into a mindset of feeling like, what have we done? What is happening? What have we done to the world? What has been created? Or what have the people in power done? There could be a lot of desire to blame something or someone or look for an explanation of all of this, who could be held accountable, that sort of thing. But in reading this parable, in reading this section of this book and the retelling of this parable, I thought, wow, we're really being given an opportunity to see God in all of this. I mean, here is a global affliction that is causing a lot of pain and fear and distress. Yet we get to choose how we look at it. And how I look at it is that the divine dance of the universe is playing itself out in all of us right now, right here in this particular period in time. And so in my wavy, topsy-turvy days this week, I'm consistently trying to bring myself home to the fact that I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to feel great every day. I just have to stay rapturously present to my feelings, to what's coming up for me, and bring myself back to the idea that God is everywhere. And if you don't connect with the term God, then maybe it's the divine, or maybe it's magic, or maybe it's joy, or maybe it's love is everywhere. But it's hard to see sometimes when we feel sad, when we feel like the wind's been taken out of our sails, when we worry for our families. But I'm here to remind us all that it's a choice, and you have to work at it sometimes. You have to look for the good. One of the things that's helped me the most is every night before bed, I have a gratitude practice. So I just have a simple note in my phone, and I'll say, today I am grateful for. And I might list a nice conversation I had with someone. I might list a delicious meal I enjoyed, or reading my book in the sunshine. Whatever it was, I just try to really impress those things upon my memory so that they move from short term to a little bit longer term. So, however you can, look around you and see joy, see love, see the divine. Even if it's in the cup of tea you still get to brew yourself in the morning, or the child you get to tuck in at night, or the look in your lover's eyes, or the friend that made you laugh on FaceTime. Whatever it is, when you experience it, in the moment, if you can, feel that appreciation surge through your body. Dunk yourself in the love of the present moment and relish the fact that even in the midst of all the crazy, there's so much good. So we'll dive into this episode soon, but I did just want to mention that this life that we live is unpredictable. And at the time of recording this podcast, I was in a beautiful, committed relationship. And Sarah was also in a relationship. And now, at the time of release, both of those relationships that we were in have ended. And I have been spending the last 4 weeks sort of processing my role in the ending of my relationship and the beautiful gifts and the beautiful lessons, and also the pain of something ending. And of course, when I saw that this was the episode up for release this week, I had a little bit of resistance and I had the choice to change it. But I've made a commitment to myself that when something scares me or when I have resistance, I try to do it very intentionally anyway, because I truly believe that's where the most growth comes from. So although it's vulnerable to release an episode where I talk so fondly of a lover whom I'm no longer with, it feels important because I want to honor and I want to cherish the memories of how much I learned in that relationship. And I believe that what you're going to hear in this podcast will enrich your relationships. So it wouldn't be right to keep it from you all. It is such a beautiful interview. I thank you all for listening and for being here and challenging me to show up week after week as we release these, to grow through sharing my own truth. This has been the greatest gift. I love hearing from you all. Thank you so much to those of you who have shared screenshots or little screen grabs of the episode that you're listening to, and you've tagged me on Instagram at Thought Room Podcast. I love when you guys do that. It really makes my day. Thank you to all of you who have left reviews and have supported this podcast in other ways. It is such a delight to connect with you all. So let's do this. Let's step into the thought room with my beautiful friend, Sarah Riegelhuth. Sarah Riegelhuth, welcome to the Thought Room.
Thank you, Hallie. Thank you for having me, and well done pronouncing my surname.
I practiced. Can't take all the credit. We are recording right now, sitting in front of each other in this little podcast nest of pillows I made in the center of the Maloka at Soltara Healing Center in Costa Rica.
Yeah, eye-gazing.
Eye-gazing intimately. And it's a super hot day.
It is.
My forehead is shiny. And the breeze is blowing, and it's beautiful. It's wonderful to be back here. And this is not your first time here, is that correct?
No, second trip. I was here in May 2019 last year, and here I am again early 2020, and such a beautiful way to start the new year.
Mm. And so when you first came here, how did you hear about this whole entire experience of ayahuasca and plant medicine?
Ayahuasca I heard about probably 5 or so years ago. A really good friend of mine was staying with me in Colorado, and she talked me through her experience. And at the time I hadn't heard about it. So I was like, whoa, like, what is this? Tell me all about it. And I could definitely sense there was something inside me, but it was also sounded terrifying. So I was kind of like, you know, when you hear about something and you think, damn, I'm going to do that one day, but I really don't want to. Like, I kind of knew, but I just, yeah. And then there was many opportunities over the years. As is the way with life, it kept coming up and people would tell me about their experiences, or do you want to come and do this ceremony? And I was learning little by little more about it, but I never felt called. And then how we met actually through the Aubrey Marcus Fit for Service program, I received an email one day because obviously Dan, the founder of Soltara, is a member with us, and there was an email that was talking about Soltara and inviting us to consider attending, and I just absolutely felt called in that moment. And I was with a friend actually, he was in the other room on a phone call, and I was just checking emails while I was waiting for him, and he came back in and I was like, so I just booked an ayahuasca retreat. He was like, what do you mean, just then in the last 10 minutes? And I'm like, yeah. I got an email and I literally went and got my credit card, found a date that worked, which was about 3 weeks later, I think, from memory, or 4 weeks later. And I just felt very called. It was definitely my time. I had a breakdown October 2018. So I was kind of like 5-6 months climbing out of that and just not in a good place at all. And I'd been doing all of the things, the journaling and the yoga and the morning rituals and everything, and just keeping my head above water, but barely. And I was like, something's got to give. And it felt like this was the thing to try.
Yeah, actually, it's funny now that we're talking about the timeline, and we've mentioned this before, but this experience is recent for both you and I. We actually came to Soltara for the very first time, like 1 week apart.
I know, that's so wild.
It's so interesting. And now here we are back again, sitting in front of each other.
At that time, we would have had no idea that we would both end up back here either.
No, it's so true. And I don't even think we knew each other very well at that time. So
we hadn't met in person.
Okay,
so,
yeah. So life.
Fascinating. Because I didn't go to our first FFS summit. And so in Austin, and I met you in
Sedona.
Tulum or Sedona? Sedona, right. Yeah, so we hadn't met yet.
Because I wasn't in Tulum.
There you go.
So we were just like passing ships in the night until this moment. Beautiful. So on that note, I've only very recently gotten to discover a little bit about what you do and who you are, and the more you tell me, the more I just fall in love with you. But for those listening, can you explain a little bit about your ethos and what's kind of brought you here to this moment on your path?
Yeah, it's like, how do you quickly sum up life? But my dad was an entrepreneur, and I worked in our family business, and that kind of put me on an unknowing path to entrepreneurship, which subsequently started about 10 years ago. I started my first company right at the end of 2009, so entering the new decade as an entrepreneur. I was in financial planning, financial services, and I built and sold a number of financial planning companies over the last 10 years, including Australia's first millennial-focused financial planning company, which was a lot of fun. I'd been pretty engulfed in the financial services world. And then as I became an entrepreneur, I started to become more kind of engrossed in that world, and I started bringing what I was learning from entrepreneurship into financial planning and doing different things. And then I started launching other businesses. So I started an organization called the League of Extraordinary Women, which is really one of my life's, like that, it's like my life's work. It's one of the things I'm most proud of in my life. Started it with 3 other girls, and we're a big community for female entrepreneurs. We have events and conferences, and we just launched a mentoring platform called Meet Your Maven. So that's just been an amazing adventure to go on with these women and to really influence female entrepreneurship and the opportunities and just the stage for women to step into entrepreneurship more fully in terms of access to capital, in terms of many, many things. We've worked with government, we've worked with the G20 YEA summit, many things to kind of just promote that piece. And then along the way, I started some other businesses and failed one and all sorts of things, and ended up, I guess, to bring it full circle to like, how did I end up here at Soltara and how does it all kind of marry up is in, I think around October 2016, I was living in Beaver Creek, which is one of the world's most luxury ski resorts. I was living in an 8-bedroom, 8-bathroom mansion. Absolutely had everything I want. I had money in the bank. I had my husband. I had this mansion. I just hosted 15 of my friends from Australia for Christmas. I was living the dream, but I realized I just wasn't happy, like inside, or I think the words I had for it back then were I wasn't happy, but I didn't love myself. I wasn't peaceful. I wasn't content. And it was October, just before that Christmas we hosted, that I kind of realized that. And I set my goal for myself. I stopped setting all these external goals like this much money or this house or this adventure or whatever it might be. And I was like, wow, I've really got to do the work on myself. And Christmas came and went, had the most amazing time. Everybody kind of petered off and life went on. And I realized, shit, I don't know if I'm really happy in my marriage. And that came to me really quickly. But it was almost like all the puzzle pieces fell into place. So my marriage was a casualty of this journey of self-discovery and self-love. And that was kind of the first thing to change. And then I went on, it's been almost 3 years since we officially split. And it's been a period of me really stepping into myself and understanding who I am as a person who's not in relationship and not reliant on others to have all of my needs met, and to wake up, I guess, and stop numbing out from the life that I really want to live. So I was very busy, distracted by being this super busy entrepreneur with all of these things going on. And, I had to start unpacking all of that. I entered another relationship very quickly that was really challenging. I'm more anxious. I have abandonment wounding, I've now discovered, and he was more on the avoidance side. And so it was a really big roller coaster for anyone who's familiar with attachment styles. It's really challenging.
Have you read that book, Attached?
Yes, I've read Attached, and Your Brain on Love is another really good one. Yeah, that was a really wild ride, but certainly a deep soul connection and so many lessons. It's where I really uncovered all of these things that I'd set about in October 2016 to work on and understand about myself. But that breakup was hell on earth. It just tore my heart out. And I feel like I felt every past breakup. I feel like I grieved for everything I hadn't grieved before because I was so busy being busy and distracting myself. My dad passed away in 2013. I feel like I grieved that. So many things. And we split up about a month and a half before I came to Soltara. So it was really, that relationship was the thing that kind of broke me, which was really all of my own stuff, of course, but that was the mirror that I needed, everything that I needed to see, all of my patterns and everything that was going on. And that relationship broke me, and then I started climbing my way out, and we split up during that climb out. And coming here to Soltara was like really the start of my very intense healing process.
And so that was the first time you came here, and this is a question I often think about, because sometimes with this sort of work, people will say, well, if you go and you do it and you find healing, then why do you need to come back?
Oh, somebody asked me that on my Instagram this morning.
Right. Well, that's probably why I'm asking it to you now, is like, that's a pervasive question. Of course, I have my own thoughts on it, but I'd love to hear, for you, what is that?
I think it's the discovery that the work is never really done. It's there's layers and layers. All of these abandonment wounding that I've been healing has been to do with my dad. But I did a whole lot of healing when I was 19 years old, when I forgave him for leaving our family. I took a very adult perspective, and I could see and I could understand, because I'd been in relationships with myself, and I was like, okay, they don't always work out, and I forgive you and I love you, and Mom, I love you. But that was just one layer, that was me forgiving what had happened from this mature perspective at a surface level. What I've had to do, what I discovered in myself with this deep abandonment wound, was I've had to go back to 6-year-old Sarah and 10-year-old Sarah and 3-year-old Sarah and sit with that little girl and heal her, because she isn't an adult that can just be like, oh, well, it's okay. Like at those times in my life where I needed to not feel abandoned, I did. And so I just think there's layers and layers, and I felt called to come back. I think a new year felt like a really nice time to come. I felt ready to do some more work, and I felt like there was more layers for me to unpack around my overall relationship with my father, with men, with myself, and with relationship in general. I don't live a conventional life. I never really have, and it seems to be getting more unconventional. And there's struggles with that. I regularly feel challenged by the fact that having a husband and children and a white picket fence and a good job isn't enough for me. And I wish that it was sometimes. I just want to be happy with that simplicity, but I'm not. And that's been a big thing that I've been working through, is understanding like who I am when I'm not in relationship, why I've had the patterns I have. I wanted to do some healing around that, and then understand and make more peace with the life I am and will continue to live, which is one of movement and flow and a lot of experience. And I have no idea how relationships fit into that. I have a better idea now that we're at the end of the week, but that's what called me back here.
So much of what you are saying is striking directly in my heart on so many levels, talking about these layers and reflecting back on my own experience of my parents splitting up when I was 9, and they were in a 3-year custody battle, and it was pretty messy at times. They had their own lawyers, and then we as children had our own lawyer. And doing the same thing to myself, kind of intellectually understanding and going, yeah, I mean, I'm better off. I remember talking myself kind of out of it, even at 12 or something, going, well, it's better this way. I get 2 Christmases. They're going to be in better moods. They're going to be able to love other people, and I'll benefit from that. Why would I ever want them to stay with someone they don't love, and all of this? But it's exactly like you said, it's not just stored in the mind. There's this emotional body, this subtle energy body that is absorbing a lot of it. And it doesn't speak the same language. It doesn't have the capability to rationalize itself out of it. And I think some of us walking this path, we have a tendency to be a little too cerebral sometimes about it and just go very zen and go, it's all okay. Everyone's in a process. It's true. We're all doing the best that we can, but there's still this emotional layer that needs to be acknowledged, not just should be acknowledged. It has to, for our own healing. And that might involve a lot of crying or a lot of screaming or things that we don't necessarily consider mature. But it needs to come out.
Yeah, I think all of the rationalizing and logic and understanding things from our mental perspective is one step. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily heal what we felt as that little child, and it's still in us if we haven't had or been shown or been taught or had space to release it in a safe place, which usually many of us were unable to because of the turmoil that was going on at the time. There wasn't anyone there who could like hold that space for us necessarily.
And there's this other mirror I'm feeling from you right now, which is the fact that, we're both female entrepreneurs. We've both expressed at times that it was generally easier for us to befriend males or to be one of the guys and joke with the guys, hang with the guys. I grew up with mostly all brothers. Yet at the same time, speaking from my own experience and perspective, I had this radical resentment of the masculine that I was carrying. And also at times became like a very sharp version of the masculine, just totally out of touch with my feminine self. And that's some of that has had to be worked out in ceremony here at Soltara in maybe not the most beautiful ways, but just being shown my anger toward men and resentment of, traumas and little things that inevitably get flung your way. And we're all just trying to navigate through and figure this out, and finding that deep compassion for ourselves for the times in our lives where we didn't have the tools to deal with what we were interfacing with. So yeah, that really hits home for me.
Oh, that's so much of what I dug up this week, and it was not necessarily what I expected or how I knew it, because like we were saying, the rational mind, I can look back on the series of events that happened, but I don't, it's not always as it seems. And what I discovered, I've been very in my masculine most of my life. My dad left when I was 10, and I stepped into this role wanting to look after my mum because I could see she was very down about it, depressed probably, I don't know, undiagnosed, but wasn't in a good place. And my sister was younger than me, and she was my little sister. So I've got to take care. And I've been working since I was 14 years old, multiple jobs. I've always really I have to take care of myself. I have to take care of my family. I've been looking after my money. I even had investment funds set up for my mum and my sister because even as an adult, I was like, they are my responsibility. And in terms of my career, very masculine, just driving, pushing. And my first trip to Soltara, I really discovered my feminine energy, and it was so beautiful. And I've kind of gone the last, whatever it is, eight months or so, really understanding and integrating that masculine and feminine. But what I found in ceremony, my second ceremony here, was this toxic masculine that I've been carrying since I was about, I think maybe 10 years old. And it was essentially, I wanted to understand what was happening with my dad. So I was going back through my memories and being shown all these memories, and my dad was literally nowhere. There was no essence of him that I could find in ceremony. And what I then kind of understood was that as a girl, a little girl, I don't know if this is true or not, because my dad is no longer with us, and I wasn't actually shown anything of his perspective. But what I understood in ceremony was that my perspective was that I wasn't really wanted. And somehow I turned that into, because I'm a girl. And I remember I then came across all of these memories of me being between the ages of about 10 and 14, I just wish I was a boy. It would just be so much easier. I just wish I was a boy. And I adopted then this kind of I don't know, I feel like there was this kind of angry teenage boy living in me, and I dressed like a boy when I was a teenager. I mean, it was the grunge era and we all kind of wore band t-shirts, but I mean, still I dressed like a boy, and I went back through those memories and I was like, wow, I was really not very feminine. And later in life, yes, maybe I've looked feminine and all of that, but I've definitely acted from more of my masculine power. But discovering this kind of toxic, unhealed masculine, seeing how as a teenager and into my 20s, I kind of became that guy's girl where I was always hanging out with the boys, and they would open up to me and tell me whatever they wanted about women and sex and all the things. And I would just go along with it because I wanted to be cool. I wanted to be one of them. And it made me feel less like that girl that I was obviously ashamed of if I could sit and be in that space and just let them say whatever they wanted to say. But really, I also am a woman. And it was also, hitting me. And then I was rejecting myself every single time in all of those moments. So I had a beautiful ceremony where I was able to shed, literally like crawl out of that skin of that unhealed.
I loved your sharing this morning about, leaning over and that sensation of like that little boy
crawled out of my head.
crawling out of the top of your head and just running home to the shaman or,
Yes. And it was interesting because it was Sui, the male shaman, who the boy ran home to. And I had this moment of feeling like that poor boy though, like I still need to heal him. And then I realized, no, he's going home to be healed. He's going to be okay. And he ran out of my head to Sui, which, as these things are, they sound so strange when you say them.
So
but
strange.
They make so much sense when you're in the middle of it. But after that, I lifted up and I like literally peeled my skin back from the crown of my head all the way off. And I felt my body. I touched my shoulders and my arms and then my torso and all the way down my legs. And I felt like I felt more feminine. I felt my inner goddess. I was like, there I am. And I don't have this toxic, unhealed masculine energy, this boy living inside me that I'm carrying around. And it felt so beautiful. And I spent the rest of the evening just like running my fingers up and down my legs and up and down my hands and just really being soft with myself and just enjoying this new kind of new birth, new me. And I did really feel on Wednesday like it had been a rebirth. I mean, I've had several, but it definitely felt like a rebirth. I felt new and shiny and beautiful.
So beautiful. That image of you kind of gently feeling all the little tender parts of your body and just being like, this is mine. Mm-hmm. This is mine. I've had that, and I've had the feeling like, oh, I'm so sorry, body. Like, I'm so sorry. I wasn't appreciating how beautiful you are. What a beautiful body I get to have in this lifetime.
And how much of my life I showed up for men as a sex object versus, and I knew how to be that. I was an exotic dancer for 3 months when I was...
You were?
I was, yes.
Oh, wow. I'm interested. Go on.
And I mean, it was a lot of fun and it really taught me to love my body and appreciate it. But I was still in that unhealed space where I loved and appreciated it for its power, but it was almost like a power over men versus the power
like
within.
That manipulative sort of. And to your point, I mean, this reminds me a little bit of what you were sharing too when you said you set the intention to, what was it? I don't want to misparaphrase you, but about reconnecting with the goddess or being shown your goddess energy. And you said you had this expectation a little bit.
Oh yeah, my Thursday night ceremony, because I'd found my inner goddess. I was like, all right, tonight I'm going to go into this ceremony and I'm asking, show me my divine inner goddess. And I was imagining, it's probably the first ceremony I've actually gone in with expectations, but I was imagining this beautiful goddess was going to burst out of me, dripping with gold and light. And I was going to be like worshiping her, and it was going to be the most beautiful visual experience. But in the end, it was nothing like that. It was, I kind of half opened my eyes at one point and I saw bright light down one side of my body and dark shadow down the other, but I felt centered and I was like, oh, I am the light and the shadow. And I then was shown all of these memories and experiences and even like kind of new random scenarios. They were all very emotive and I actually can't grasp or remember them now, but what I remember is the sensation that I was solid. I was just there and these things could happen around me, but I was in alignment. I was grounded. I was strong. It was like almost like, I guess I was my spirit that lives within my consciousness, my soul that is currently in the Sarah Riegelhuth meat suit, and what she's experiencing is going to be there and going to happen. But that goddess within, that soul, that spirit within is like actually unfazed by all of these things, you know?
I love that line. I am the light and I am the darkness. That is... So this brings me back to what you were saying about being an exotic dancer is maybe you resonate with this, but at least for me personally, I feel like my journey in understanding my sexuality has been an oscillation between like diving into that manipulative darkness where I felt that men were projecting a certain identity onto me, and I just went, well, this is my identity then. Everyone's going to objectify me. Fine. You want to take me out to lunch? Fine. Doesn't mean I'm going to call you back. Or, it sounds horrible to say now, but
it's the way you feel you can get your power in that context.
Totally. Because you know what? I did feel powerless at times. I felt like lonely, like nobody really wanted to get to know me at all. They just were looking at my body and said, like I was a menu, and was like, yeah, I'll have that. Like with no disregard or no regard for the human being that I was inside. And at its worst for me, I tried the whole dating apps and things for a while. This was years ago. But I remember, New York City and dating, it's infamous for being really hard to meet people, even though there's population-wise so many people. It's just a zoo there. And I remember this one day that I had a Tinder date, and it was like for dinner or something like that. And then I thought, you know what? I've got some time and I look really cute. I'm going to meet a guy before that for a drink. And I met this guy for a drink, and then I was like, sorry, I have to go. I have a dinner meeting, not really telling him where I was going. Then I went to this dinner, and then the guy wanted me to stay and have another drink. And I was like, oh no, sorry, I have something else. And I actually messaged a third guy and went to a comedy show. And it was horrible. I mean, it's like embarrassing now. I think even one of the guys dropped me off where I was going to the next place. They had no idea. And then that one wasn't really going well. So I messaged one last person, and I was like, oh, I'm actually in your neighborhood. Like they had been wanting to meet with me for a while. I was like, I'm here. If you can meet me in 10 minutes, we can have an after drink. And I went on 4 dates in one night. I mean, I can't even connect to that woman because she was in so much pain. She was searching for something that couldn't be found outside, and it makes me emotional to think about. But this is why we need to talk about it, because I have a feeling both men and women, often we get really confused about what to do. I mean, we want to connect with each other. We both want the same thing. And I know for men, when I talk to them about this, they're often feeling like, well, it's a numbers game. We have to send out tons of messages to women because women don't respond. And women are saying, we don't respond to your messages or your cat calls because they're disrespectful or they're unthoughtful, or you haven't asked you haven't really
There's energy behind it, and you can feel if that is the same message that just went to 7 women. Even if you don't know that and you can't articulate it, there is an energy that you're sensing, and that's why. Energy,
yes. And, we might sound a little bit hippy-dippy saying this, but the more that I walk this path and the more that I discover, it really all comes down to that. Have you ever been in a conversation, you can just tell someone is not listening to you?
Totally.
Or they're speaking to you, but they're not looking at you, and they're looking all around the room, and you're desperately looking at them, trying to connect with what they're saying. And it just feels like you're talking to a glass eyeball. It's horrible. It's an affliction facing all of us, I think.
This world of dating apps is certainly not helping the situation. But yeah, anyway, that's another conversation. I think what's coming up for me is like this journey to healing the sexual shame, and it's been such a wavy ride for me, where I was a very sexually explorative teenager and all of that. And then I was shamed for it. And then I became an exotic dancer, and I felt like I was taking a lot of my power back. At the time, I actually didn't do any drugs, and I had a boyfriend. So like I kind of thrived off the fact that I was doing this thing that everybody assumed you were totally off the rails, and I was actually pretty straight-laced at that time. But then I went into my 20s and I was so buttoned up because I had so much shame from my teen years, and I actually it felt like I lost my libido and I couldn't surrender to a man. I had a boyfriend when I was quite young who wouldn't go down on me because he told me that vaginas were disgusting. And that took a really long time for me to heal and truly surrender to a man. And, in my 30s and more recently, I've been much more surrendered, much more open, but I can see now, you know, there was still more healing to come, and there was still more. And this week here at Soltara has helped me. I actually contacted one of my lovers, and I asked him, next time we see each other, I have a request, and I'd really love you to undress me as if it's the first time you've ever seen me, and that you are unveiling the goddess. And he was, because I love him and he's so beautiful, he was like, I would love to do that for you. Absolutely, I will. And, you know, the fact that I feel safe enough to ask that, I feel confident enough and ready enough to be seen in that way. I want to rewrite, or maybe create a new story, I suppose, around who I am sexually, and heal all of that past shame and all of those different feelings we go through, trying to understand our power as a woman, and what is kind of that toxic power and what is like true empowerment.
Wow. This is really aligned for me. And I've been here, I guess, 8 weeks now. And I'm recalling a ceremony I had one of the weeks where I had to apologize to my body. And basically I was lying there, and then I felt this sense, it was, I don't know how to describe it, but like the essence of my body coming in and saying, be accountable right now. And my first reaction was, of course, but I did the best that I could, and like to rationalize, to be defensive. And then I relaxed into that feeling, and I just felt so sad. And then I had to sit there and allow the film screen of my psyche to replay all of the times I had let my body be dishonored by men that didn't love me or care for me, and I didn't protect myself energetically or physically, and stay centered, stay in that place of my soul and allow it to all be true. Acknowledge it to come up in that subtle energetic body that we're talking about, and own it. And had this talk with my body and said, you know what's beautiful is that we never have to do that again. Yeah.
Oh, sister, I feel you. That is so beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, it got so bad for me. I spiraled into a really deep depression. I was convinced I was going to be alone forever, and that just made me kind of isolate more and more. I got more busy, like you said, that addiction to busyness and distraction. No one would know because I would be very sociable. I'd be the life of the party and making everyone laugh, but inside was just there's so much of that darkness that was dominating, not very much lightness, not very much of that feminine softness. And at one point, I think there was just too much trauma, and my womb actually shut down, and I stopped menstruating completely. And this was not that long ago. I mean, I think it was maybe 2016, 2017. I lost my period for almost 2 years. And the ironic thing was that was the very same time I was launching my company, Lunar Wild, which is all about helping young women to connect with their menstrual cycles and celebrate it as a sacred rite of passage. And so I was being asked to come speak about periods and connecting with your menstrual cycle and the moon cycle, and talk about how to honor that ritualistically every month. And I felt like a complete fraud. And it was so painful. At the time, I didn't understand it. You know, I was like, what is this? Why? I just want my period to come. I just want that period to come. And I was still trying to will
Push
it to come.
Force it out.
I had to work with, I think I posted about this on we have a little WhatsApp group with some of our Fit for Service ladies. And I shared about a tantric coach that I worked with. Her name is Martina Hughes. She's out of Australia, and she runs this website called Tantric Blossoming. And I worked with her for about 3 months doing one-on-one calls. And she would ask me things that would agitate me so much. I was like, why is she asking me this? This is totally irrelevant. And then she would just kind of gently get me to observe how charged I was about whatever she was asking. And then I would just burst into tears. And she's like, tell me why you're crying. I'm like, I have no idea. I am so angry. I am so angry and I can't explain it. So after working with her for 3 months, miraculously or not so, my period came back. So it's
amazing. I love your company and what you're doing, and it's very close to my heart because I was on birth control since I was, I don't even remember, 15, whatever age I was when I started having sex, which was, around 15. I was on birth control and I only went off it right before my marriage kind of ended. So I finally started getting to know my body at 34, 35 years of age. I did not know anything about my cycle. I had gone for many years without a period. I'd skipped them. I was having very light, if at all, periods as well, I think because very similar reasons to what you've talked about. And then I just started skipping them altogether because I was like, well, they don't really come anyway. So many years of really nothing, having no connection with my body and with my monthly cycles and with what was happening with that creative, beautiful center of my body that every single month essentially, births things or can birth things. It's like wild to think that I just went through so much of my life, 20 years, without having any connection with it. And I feel not right now, but I have also felt anger for that, for being 15 years old and being put on birth control. And when I say put, honestly, I was so independent, I wouldn't put myself on it, but that's the system, it's the system, it's the school system, it's you go to the GP, that's what we call a doctor in Australia. I'm not sure what you call it in the US, but your family doctor, and, they prescribe you with a pill and nobody talks to you about any other options. Nobody's really sitting down and talking. When I got my first period, I was on school camp and I was so embarrassed. I didn't tell any of my girlfriends because I didn't have any products with me and I assumed they probably wouldn't. And then I didn't want everyone to know that I had my period and I was stuffing toilet paper in my underwear because that was all I knew what to do. And it was terrible. I was so embarrassed and so ashamed. And it took me months to tell my best girlfriend, Anna, who's actually here at Soltara with me. But yeah, it was just, there was nothing. There was no guidance. There was no... And it makes me so upset sometimes to think that happened, that I didn't know my feminine power and strength and everything that I was capable of as a woman until I was like 35 years old and started opening my eyes to it.
I think what you're describing is going to resonate with so many women. And beyond that, I've thought, well, if we don't know what's going on with our own bodies, how can we possibly expect to help teach the men?
I know.
What we want.
So many men, were like, oh, periods are gross. And another reason why I skipped it, because it eliminated even having to have that conversation with the partner. And I look back and I'm like, well, I didn't know how to hold space and say, hey, they're not gross. They're beautiful. I understand that you have some conditioning and you don't necessarily know or understand. Let's sit and talk about it. And, it's only been the last year or so that I've had the most amazing, beautiful, connected period sex. And I just never had that because...
Yes. But I mean, a word of warning too, because period sex to me is one of the most sacred things you can share in a partnership. Period. End of story. Pun intended. Mic drop. It is the literal exchanging of DNA. It is the goddess. It is the dirt. It is the earth. It is the smells. It is painting each other with the color of each other's bodies. Like, it is the real deal. And I regret to say that there have been times I allowed period sex when energetically I probably shouldn't have been having that exchange, because it is just, it's sacred. I mean, it's so, your blood is just so sacred. It's the fact that women menstruate and it happens on its own, physiologically, connected to the cycles of the earth every single month. And it's really the only time that human beings bleed without saying something's wrong or you're dying. You know, if you believe in evolution, then things that are not relevant just go away, right? We just breed them out over time. This has a very specific purpose, or it would not be here. It is catharsis. It is the way that women can hold the amount of emotion and space that they hold in the world. We have this biological mechanism that allows us to purge the pent-up energy in our own way. I actually heard this fascinating perspective from my acupuncturist who said that women purge through their menstrual blood, and then in the perspective of Chinese medicine, men are actually purging that same sort of ethos through their beards, through their facial hair, like it's getting pushed out that way, which I found so fascinating. And so she talked about women with periods that are suppressed actually growing body hair in other areas and having it come out that way, like as a hormonal imbalance effectively.
Because it has to come out.
It's got to get out one way or the other. But on the topic of period sex, I remember when I met my most, with my my current partner, I should say. I'm still getting used to saying that because I've, been flying solo for so long. But when he met me, had been reading this book on the sacred feminine, which I don't even think he knew about the company that I was running or anything. And, we just kind of started to be together. And I said, hey, listen, just want to let you know, like, I'm on my period this week. And expecting him to be like, oh, okay, And he just stopped, rapturously looked me deeply in the eyes. And he said, I wondered if you might consider sharing that with me.
I love this man.
I love this man, and I just, every hair on my arm stood up, and I just thought, oh my gosh, I am doing the work. If I went from that to having this man say, your blood is sacred to me. And not only it's just acceptable, like it's not gross, it's sacred to me. And then the way that he treated that and held it with such honor and respect, like, thank you for giving this to me, this gift of you on your moon. I just want every man to know what that felt like for me as a woman, so that they might consider holding that space for the women in their lives that they love, because that is a sort of medicine, that is a sort of sex magic that can heal our world.
It really is so incredible. And my same lover, who I have asked to unveil the goddess, is the first man that I've really shared that beautiful period sex with. And it was so healing and so beautiful. And it was a painting. It is.
Yeah.
But it was just so beautiful, and such the love that I felt for him and the connection and how honored and worshipped I felt was just like nothing I've ever experienced before. The bond that you can form when you choose to share that with somebody who is just so open and so willing and so desiring of that, especially when you've been through, the many other horrendous experiences with men throughout your life. I do remember when you told me that story in Sedona, and we were with a bunch of women in the birthing cave. And if anyone has been to Sedona or is going to Sedona, it's absolutely worth hiking to the birthing cage, where you
like
sit
a giant
inside the vagina and you look out, essentially. But that was such a special moment for us. I think there was maybe 15 or 20 of us, maybe not that many. And we sat and we talked about our yonis, and we talked about this experience that you had. And oh man, that was just the energy in Sedona, that story. And every single woman in that cave just looked at you like, we're all in love with this man. Nobody's seen him or met him, but he is a king.
Yeah. And he definitely makes me feel like a queen. And so I'm thinking, damn, it took me a long time to get here, and I'm still on the path of understanding how to navigate these relationships. But I've gained a lot of tools, and I'm sure that you have too. And I'm thinking about the people listening to this going, what they have, I want a little bit more of that. I want to sprinkle of that in my relationship. But maybe women listening to this not knowing how to begin the journey of asking for what they want, or maybe discovering their own bodies, and men listening to this feeling like maybe their partner isn't going to be receptive, or they don't want to be too aggressive, they don't want, maybe she feels like, or she seems like she's rejecting sex a little bit, and they're not sure how to navigate that. Do you have any tools for men or women who are wanting to kind of entrench themselves in discovering their sexuality?
Tantra, and I'm not super experienced, but I've read some books and just had some experiences, but I've found that to be a really great starting point. There's a book called Urban Tantra that I really love.
Barbara Carellis.
It's so good.
Shout out. And I've met her.
Oh,
she's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, I think she's from New York City. So I've been to some of her live workshops.
That book is fabulous, and there are things you can do on your own as a woman. I was reading that book on the plane, and I decided to go into the bathroom and practice some of those.
You did?
Wow. And it was amazing. So I joined the Mile High Club by myself.
That's amazing. I would be clapping right now, but I'm holding a microphone. That's amazing.
That book is fabulous. And I've had one partner who, I started talking about Tantra, and he was a little bit resistant of the idea, I should say. Resistant is the best word to use. And I think for a lot of men, it can come across, if you're not fully understanding Tantra, which is, and I'm no expert, but essentially the simplest thing is it's an energetic connection, and it doesn't have to be sex. But I think a lot of men in particular, my experience has been like it's a threat that they're not a good enough lover, and that's really not what it's about at all. But I read that book and started practicing some of the techniques, which is a lot to do with breath, imagining light, the types of things that you do in meditation, and had some really beautiful tantric experiences with that lover. And afterwards he was like, what was that? And I was like, well, that was Tantra, babe. And he's like, wow, I felt like a light come through my body. And that kind of helped him, loosen his grip and step into it a little bit more. But a really simple thing, beautiful visualization, I think, for women. And none of this that I'm talking about is specific to the period stuff. I think we can talk about that a little bit as well. But just surrendering to your man is imagining you are like a tight flower, like a rosebud is in your chest, and it's all tight like a bud. It's just there. And as your man explores you and you're kissing and you're making out and you're sort of warming up, imagine that rose just opening and opening and opening. And then eventually it's like so open and the petals just start falling off. And just imagine that as your surrender process. See where it gets you.
Wow. I love that. Yeah, because I think for a lot of women, it is about being able to relax. And I think we feel often that we hold so much, and that often women are the heads of households. They have kids. They're making everything work on a tight schedule. We can't just turn on at the drop of a hat. It really is up to the man in some way to create the container for her to feel safe to do that, to take all those layers off and let the rose petals just fall away. So even with any ritual, we're working with medicines, it's like set and setting, really. It's like getting the mindset right. And for women, I think, I don't want to speak generally, but I guess maybe for myself, I know that foreplay for me occurs throughout the entire day. It's not just in the moment. It's little things that are done. It's the way your words are dripping off your tongue. It's the moments you come up and surprise kiss me behind while I'm cooking. It's like those things.
A hand across the lower back.
Totally. And do you need anything? Can I help you with anything right now? Like those things, I'm like, oh my gosh. That's what really gets me. So, wow, I love that so much. I'm thinking about when I was single and just kind of getting into Tantra. and trying to turn my feminine back on and do some womb healing, one thing that I did was I planned an entire date with myself. And I went to a little cheese counter. I picked out all this stuff for a beautiful charcuterie board, some chocolate. I picked up a bottle of wine for myself. And then I went home. I cut everything up. I had fresh fruit. I turned on some like Indian dance music. I lit candles everywhere. And I just slowly, in the candlelight, fed myself
So beautiful.
grapes and chocolate, and I let it, touch my lips very slowly and allowed those petals to come off, to breathe, to just enjoy the sensory experience of being right where I was. And you can do that alone or with a partner, just to come back home to yourself and remember that we incarnated into these sensory bodies so that we could breathe the air, we could taste the food, we could touch the skin. And so why not pause the entire world? I promise it'll be there when we get back, and just be here now.
Oh, I think starting with self-love is such a great place as well. Like getting comfortable with masturbation and your own body, because there's a lot of shame around that, and turn it into something so beautiful like what you just described, and something that's so ritualistic or ceremonial really changes and reframes that for yourself, what you're communicating to yourself, because many of us grew up and had experiences where our parents told us, don't do that, good girls don't do that. Whatever it may be, it could have come from your schooling system. It took me many years to admit that I masturbate, because there was definitely a story that women don't masturbate and men do, which is not true. Yeah, so I think that's also a really fabulous place to start, is just with yourself and getting so comfortable with yourself, getting to know your own body and what you like and what you don't like. And then you can slowly start to communicate those things with a partner, which I also know can be very uncomfortable to talk about sex. Sometimes we've spent our whole sexual lives not talking about it, just doing it. And that can be really difficult to talk about. I like this, I don't like this. But maybe just say one thing next time you have sex with your partner. I really liked that, and just see how that feels, and just slowly start opening up that conversation.
Yeah, remaining curious and having the conversations ahead of time about, not taking anything personally. It's like really the reason I'm asking questions, or the reason I'm giving feedback, is because I want us to enjoy our lovemaking to the most ecstatic level. And I desire to know how to please you the most. I mean, who doesn't respond well to that, right? So yeah, I mean, I'm on board. I think that's all super accurate, super bang on.
Oh, what a beautiful conversation.
Yeah, this has been amazing. Wow, we covered such a breadth of topics today, and I want to thank you for the example of who you are, for your balance, your power, your femininity, your friendship, and your beautiful heart. Sarah, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story.
My pleasure, sister. Sitting here in this beautiful Maloka, eye-gazing with you, recording a podcast, talking about all these wonderful things has just been such a delight, such an amazing way to finish off what's been a really special week here at Soltara. And I could not love this place more, and I couldn't love you more.
Aww. All the feels. Where can people find you after this? Because everyone's going to want more Sarah.
Well, you can jump on Instagram. It's at Sarah Riegelhuth, SarahRiegelhuth. I have a website, sarahriegelhuth.com, where I blog and sometimes send out emails. Really only if I feel I have something to say. And my company, Grow My Team, that's what I'm working on at the moment. You can catch me there as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sarah.
My pleasure.